Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, the Metropolitan Police have relaunched an appeal concerning the tragic deaths of two women at an Ashake concert in London's Brixton O2 Academy. 12 months on, no arrests have been made and bereaved family members are demanding justice. I'll be bringing you their heartbreaking statements shortly. And the UK government's landmark Rwanda bill was voted through on Tuesday night, but the issue still threatens to tear the Conservative Party apart. Our business correspondent Simon Pusey will soon be joining me in the studio to discuss what this means for Rishi Sunak as leader. And I'll also be speaking with Yolande Makolo, the Rwandan government spokesperson in Kigali, for her reaction to the controversial emergency legislation. Then later, Glenn Hodgson, the founder and CEO of the European policy think tank Free Trade Europa, will be joining me from Stockholm to examine what the future of work will look like ahead of 2024. But first, the COP28 climate talks in Dubai ended in a historic deal that committed the world to a transition away from all fossil fuels for the first time. The UAE brokered an agreement that was strong enough for the US and European Union on the need to dramatically curb fossil fuel use while keeping Saudi Arabia and other oil producers on board. For small island nations that are already feeling the worst impacts of rising sea levels, the so-called UAE consensus has only taken incremental steps. Separately, progress was finally made on the new collective quantified goal, which builds on the $100 billion pledged by developed nations to finance climate mitigation and adaptation initiatives in developing nations. Notably, that $100 billion goal has not yet been met and is far short of what is needed. This year's COP saw an agreement to draft a post-2025 finance target ahead of COP29. This is a step forward, but like loss and damage last year, the details will only be hammered out in 2024. Elsewhere, an asylum seeker of African descent has died on board the Bibi Stockholm, the controversial barge used by the UK government to house migrants. The man died in a suspected suicide on the boat in Portland Port, Dorset, and was found on Tuesday morning. A few hundred asylum seekers have been living on the three-storey barge since October, after it was finally given the all-clear 2 months after it was evacuated following the discovery of Legionella bacteria in the water supply. The news came just hours before Rishi Sunak headed off a Conservative revolt over his flagship Rwanda migration bill, as the House of Commons voted by 313 to 269 to back the legislation in principle. It was a comfortable victory for the Prime Minister, but the government majority of 44 was only secured after a day of pleading and arm twisting, and with warnings that the revolt is far from over.
Yet again, the Tory party is in meltdown and everyone else is paying the price. Now, he's kicked the can down the road, but in the last week, his MPs have said of him, he's not capable enough. He's inexperienced. He's arrogant. A really bad politician. When they're shouting, this is what they said.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about governing and spent the first two questions talking about political tittle-tattle, Mr. Speaker. What a joke! What a joke! Well, let's get on to the substance, Mr. Speaker. Let's get on to the substance. He mentioned the things. What is the news that we've just heard in the last week? Well, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is education, Mr. Speaker, because that's how we spread opportunity in our country. And what have we learned? Where are the schools performing best in the United Kingdom? In England, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the reforms of this Conservative government, rising up the league tables, giving our kids the start they need. And where are they plummeting down? In Labour-run Wales.
Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, I think it's fair to say that this week has possibly been the most difficult since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. And that says a lot, because a lot's happened over the past 12 months. Of course, he was given his COVID testimony on Monday. Then there was the Rwanda vote on Tuesday, which passed just. There was lots of diplomacy. All the headlines in the UK say the worst is yet to come. How would you describe this week in number 10.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're talking about, and this vote you said just passed, it did just pass, but no one voted against it in the government, and we thought there was going to be a big rebellion. So it depends what way you're looking at it. I think he did narrowly avoid something quite embarrassing there by, like you said, there was quite a few breakfast drinks and food going on to try and sort of bend the ear of people, and I think he probably made some promises that in the future are going to come back to bite him, like that they can change it in various ways if they want to. It just seems like a really odd sort of thing to hang your premiership on, this stop the boats thing, and he's saying it outright. He's not saying we're going to reduce the boats. He's saying, and he's doubled down on it several times, we're going to stop the boats. There's not going to be a single boat crossing. It's just a policy that he cannot make happen. It's like not.
It's not possible.
It's not, literally not possible.
Yeah.
So why is he doing this to himself when he's got 5 pledges? One of them halve inflation. He's done that. Why don't you sort of big up your achievements? Make the best out of what you've done. You've stopped a lot of Albanians coming here.
Yeah,
talk
I think they've
more
dropped
about
by a
that.
third, haven't they?
Yeah, talk more about that. Don't keep highlighting a problem that is impossible to solve for anyone to solve, and say you're going to solve it, because you're just creating problems in the future. So this is, as we've said so many times on this programme, the Conservative Party tearing itself apart with these 5 different factions, him trying to keep them together. We always knew this was the case. Liz Truss only lasted a couple of days. I think Rishi Sunak's done very well to get to this point. He's still there, and it looks like there's no obvious challenger to sort of replace him. But yeah, we're here week in, week out talking about the difficulties he has. And I think unless there's a general election, this is just going to continue, because you've got so many different factions that want the Prime Minister to go their way, and he can't do it all. And he's trying to sort of keep it together, and unbelievably he still is. And you've got people like Robert Jenrick, who came up with this policy, who was like, he was
living and breathing immigration
his policy.
Absolutely.
He decided to resign against it, and then decided not to vote against it. So many different things that are just incredible. But yeah, the COVID policy, the COVID testimony. This is more kind of his area than Boris Johnson. I think he's good on the detail, right? And he's good on sort of.
Although he doesn't like to be challenged.
No, he gets tetchy, but he's good generally on the detail,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't kind of waffle. No. He was quite specific on what obviously the lots
Clearly
of his
well
WhatsApp.
briefed.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that is him versus Boris Johnson, right? We heard so many times that Boris Johnson wouldn't read any briefs, let alone be briefed at all. So Rishi Sunak was on top of that a little bit more. And he doesn't quite bear the same level of responsibility, I think, than Boris Johnson does. But still, obviously some difficult periods there where he's trying to talk about eat out to help out, how he said he didn't think that affected the virus at all, when scientific advisors have said the opposite. So it has been a difficult week for Rishi Sunak, but like we've been saying, he's still there. No one in his government voted against when there were rumblings that they were going to lose that vote. They didn't. But this policy is a millstone around his neck, and he's the one who's put it there because he's making such a big deal out of stopping the boats outright. And this is not just a problem for the UK, this is a problem right across Europe. The immigration minister in France has just resigned as a result of a similar kind of thing. The Italians are trying to do a deal with Albania, things like this, So I don't really understand why he's made this such a mess for himself, because it's an impossible thing to try and handle.
It is impossible, and the polls say that he is going to lose that election. We just have to wait and see exactly when it's going to be called. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's remain with this topic, examining the UK government's controversial Rwanda deportation bill. Last month, the UK Supreme Court ruled the plan was unlawful because of the risk that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda could be returned to their home countries, where they could face harm. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame and the ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front have often been credited with rebuilding a country left almost entirely destroyed after the 1994 genocide. Much of those efforts have been criticised by the British media. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Yolande Makolo. Yolande is the Rwandan government spokesperson, and she joins me now from Kigali. Yolande Makolo, thank you so much for joining me once again on Channel's Business Global. I've got to tell you, this renewed Rwanda bill has caused deep divisions in the United Kingdom, not just in the United Kingdom, of course, but in government. Rishi Sunak has had a very difficult week. What are your thoughts on the reaction of the Rwanda bill? Hello, thanks for having me. I must say, we understand that this is a process that has to happen in the UK. There's no such thing happening here in Rwanda.
And there's a reason for that. First of all, we're in this partnership for the right reasons. We want to offer people a home. We want to be a country that offers solutions to global problems. And Rwandans are used to welcoming and hosting migrants and refugees in Rwanda. There's nothing controversial about that. We've been doing it for almost 30 years now. We have over 135,000 refugees living in Rwanda, and we have groups of migrants from different parts of the world living with us here. It doesn't cause any kind of controversy. So we are watching, ready to receive the migrants when they do come. We believe in this partnership. We want it to work. We think it's beginning of a solution to saving lives and ensuring that people don't feel the need to make dangerous journeys and enrich human smugglers. There's one thing that's not very well discussed. It doesn't come up in discussions on this issue, is that there's an imbalance in opportunities between the global north and the south, and this is what's driving irregular migration, in addition to the conflicts that we see around the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there about the reasons why there is so much migration. But you're sounding very optimistic, Yolande, about these asylum seekers, refugees coming to Rwanda. More optimistic than I think MPs on both sides of the House. But the Justice Secretary just recently he suggested that the government will not cede to the right wing side of the Tory party. Asking Rishi Sunak, putting pressure on him to toughen up the legislation. But it is still a possibility. He did win the vote, but there is still more to come in the new year. Would the Rwandan government be comfortable with the British government ignoring the Human Rights Act? Because that's what activists are saying, basically, that if this legislation does pass, even without any concessions, that basically there'll be floundering human rights issues.
I mean, what we have said and what our foreign minister has put out publicly, and what we believe in, is that this partnership has to be lawful. We all have to. We are obliged to stick to the obligations that we have signed, the international ones, and our partners in the UK have done that so far, and so have we. We want to work in a partnership that is lawful, and we hope that when this process finishes, we understand that it's important for the UK. Our part really is to ensure that we are ready.
Now, the UK Supreme Court found that Rwanda was not a safe country to send refugees, but not because of human rights issues, but because there could be a risk of individuals being returned to their country of origin. Of course, that's been spun in the British media. How has the description of Rwanda felt for you, considering, the country has gone so far in trying to, turn around those descriptions?
Well, we haven't liked it. Rwandans are surprised that their country is being insulted in this way, because we have worked so hard over the last 30 years to build this country to where it is. Of course, we understand we have a long way to go. There's many challenges still. We're working on them. And one of the challenges that we're working on is economic development, socioeconomic development. This partnership with the UK is investing resources into Rwanda so that we can continue to do more of what we're doing. We know that we have built a functional country. We are accountable to Rwandans for what we do as a government. Rwandans participate massively in government programs. They trust us to a big extent to lead this country, and this is where we draw our validation from. We are accountable first and foremost to Rwandans, and when Rwandans see their country described like that, they're surprised and they're a bit confused. Where is this coming from? I think people who are against the partnership, it's their right to be against it, but do not insult Rwanda to make a point, especially when it's not true what they're saying.
Here, you have come leaps and bounds, and I can testify that it certainly felt safe to me, although, of course, you can understand that, the talk of immigration, the talk of deportation does send a shiver to any African in the diaspora in the UK, because, of course, it brings so many mixed feelings for all of us. But for now, Yolande Mokolo, the official Rwandan government spokesperson, it's been very helpful speaking to you. And thank you so much for taking out time of your busy schedule to do that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. A year ago, mother of two, Rebecca Ikumelo, aged just 33, died in a London hospital hours after being crushed at an Ashake concert held at London's Brixton O2 Academy. 23-year-old Gabby Hutchinson also died of her injuries a few days later. Another woman remains critically ill in hospital 12 months on. Despite hundreds of people witnessing the incident that led to these tragic deaths, no arrests have been made, which is why the Metropolitan Police are today relaunching an appeal pleading for more witnesses. I spoke with Rebecca's bereaved parents at New Scotland Yard, who feel totally let down by the local council and the team that organised the event. Can you talk to me about what you know of Rebecca's last movements that evening?
She actually came to me. She said she was going to Ashake to watch the concert, and she left the children with me. So she left from my house to the place. And it was later we heard that there was an outburst, people were running everywhere. The younger sister called me from uni to tell me as Rebecca returned home. I said no. Then I think that she started calling everywhere. She was the one that let us know that she's in, what's the name of the hospital?
Sorry.
Somewhere in Southeast, I've forgotten the name now. I think
King's
College or something.
King's College Hospital.
Yeah. So that was how we got to know. Then I called the dad, and we all went there. That's what happened.
No, I had a phone call from my son, Anthony Wale. It was very early in the morning. It was about 3 o'clock, and that's unusual for him to call about that time. The call went through. He actually called his brother, and he asked his brother. I called his brother Jordan, and I asked Jordan to get in touch with me to wake me up. So I picked up the call, and he just told me that Tosin, well, we call her, her name is Rebecca Tosin, and said she's in the hospital and it's bad. That's what he said. It's in the hospital and it's bad. And when I said, what happened? He said, it's bad. And I said, okay, I'll come over. But when I heard it was bad, I knew something terrible has happened. We are aware that the police are working on it. We have updates from the police, but the families still think that there should be a time scale for this investigation. What the police are saying is there's a lot of information to go through. They have a lot of video evidence to go through, but they're still appealing to a wide audience. We are still appealing to everyone who may have information, no matter how small, to come forward so that the police can look into this. The more information we have, or the police have, the help would be for the investigating team.
Because Ashake never reached out to us. He never apologized. And he was boasting on the system that he reached out to the family. He didn't. So when I heard that he came back, I was really angry. I wasn't happy at all. Yeah, especially he's also a Nigerian like us. He knows the culture and he should know what to do, but he didn't reach out to us, which is very bad. It's a life we're talking about. And this particular daughter of mine left 2 young kids, 5 and 7. He has no conscience at all.
The police are relaunching the appeal. What's been missing in the past 12 months?
So we've been trying to locate and identify witnesses that saw or heard the events that happened on that night, and with the thousands of concert goers, we only have a small percentage of those that have come forward or that we have identified. So 12 months on, we still need to identify and make a plea for those individuals, those families and groups of people that were in attendance that night to come forward if they heard or saw something that can possibly be a benefit to our investigation.
What do we know that happened that night? How did these two ladies lose their lives?
Well, what we do know is that there was a surge of people at the front gates, and that the surge happened into the venue, and there was a stampede. And the investigation is ongoing. It's complicated. It's protracted. We're still piecing it together with the vast amounts of evidence that we are gathering. We can't say, from an investigative point of view at the moment, exactly the causes, which is why we need people to come forward to help us piece the jigsaw together.
Now to my final topic. As employers navigate a changing world of work, there has been an increasing focus on agility and creating an adaptable and flexible workforce. Putting skills and mental well-being rather than jobs at the centre of the labour market is one way to do this, but how can it be achieved and what are the potential stumbling blocks? Let's ask my next guest. Glenn Hodgson is the founder and CEO of the European policy think tank Free Trade Europa, and he joins me now from Stockholm. Glenn Hodgson, as always, it is a huge pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global. And it's quite timely, this discussion, because, of course, when you get towards the new year, lots of people thinking about how they can change their lives. And, of course, work is a fundamental part of that. But why is it, or why does it appear as if the idea of working a 9 to 5 in an office is so oppressive for some people?
I think the big thing, Juliana, is the fact that since COVID and the lockdown, people have got used to digitalization, being freer, being more remote, having kind of a hybrid setup. So I think the sort of the confines of the 9 to 5, selling hours to one employer, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, has become more of a difficulty. People see the opportunities using digitalization and also want more control, more freedom, more choice about how, when and where they work and the different projects they want to be involved in to earn money and add value to companies and also to organizations.
It's quite interesting, actually, because you mentioned the pandemic, but we've been discussing this topic on this show and this platform, Glenn. Before the pandemic, the work that you do at your think tank, Free Trade Europa, has been looking at the future of work for some years now. But what are some of the stumbling blocks? Why is it so difficult for people to, work in the kind of fashion that you've just described?
I think the big problem, Juliana, is mindset. The technology is there, the tools, the applications are there, but it's the mindset, first of all, that I think is limiting people. But it's also the legislation as well. Sadly, the policy, the regulation that's coming out, and we see that at the moment with the Platform Workers' Rights Directive here in the European Union. We've actually pulled together our freelancing petition. We've got over 6,500 signatures from freelancers, remote workers who say, stop, we want to be able to have the right to freelance. We don't need a traditional job. We're not suffering. It's our own choice. We want to go down this path. And the research we've been doing in terms of the voice of freelancers and also the Future of Work 2023 study on digitalization and the labor market of tomorrow just shows that we're moving forward. But we're just seeing these barriers. It's old-fashioned mindsets. People who don't know what's happening, who don't understand the future of work and don't understand the potential. They're trying to put still trying to put the round peg in the square hole, sadly, Juliana. And this is something we're seeing so generally.
Glenn Hodgson, founder and CEO of Free Trade Europa. It's always great speaking with you on the show. Thanks, Glenn.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.